It's time to talk about one of my favorite and one of the most crucial subjects in our Survival Guide series. That's instilling a God-centered identity in our young men and women here on Let's Parent on Purpose. Hey, I'm Jay Holland, and I want to welcome you to Let's Parent on Purpose. This is a podcast for families who want to thrive and not just survive their parenting years. Each week, I'll bring you an insight or an interview that will help strengthen your marriage, parenting, or your walk with Jesus. If you find this podcast helpful, I would ask that you subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also go to letsparentonpurpose.com and search for past topics, as well as get a hold of free resources that I've created to help your family. I really honestly do love the topic that we're doing today. It's one of the ones that I hit over and over and over again. I would say if you were to talk to students who graduate from my student ministry, this might be the topic that they say that I teach the most. And the truth is, I talk about Jesus dying and rising and the gospel the most. But if you talk about a unique subject, this is the one that I'm sure that I hit the most because I think it might be the most crucial and countercultural of any of the ones that we could hit. And that's the subject of a biblical identity. That's understanding who we are as far as being made in the image of God, and then having some parameters to understand what it means to be a biblical man and a biblical woman. This is a passion of mine to teach, and I'm excited to share it with you today. If you've heard this stuff from me before, well, guess what? You're going to hear it again because it's just that important. So maybe you'll pick up something new this time around. I do want to take a moment and say thank you to our sponsor, the Lake Tahoe Couples Getaway. Speaking of manhood and womanhood, if you are a married man and woman, I can't think of anything better for you to do with your investments than invest in one another, in the spiritual and romantic and time renewal of your relationship. So you can do that at the Lake Tahoe Couples Getaway, November 13th through 16th. It's a 4-day, 3-night experience located at the only waterfront resort in Tahoe, the Hyatt Regency. You'll be joined by Emerson Eggerichs, the New York Times bestselling author and speaker, author of Love and Respect. Brandon Heath and Big Daddy Weave will be doing worship there and concerts on the lakefront. You'll have a comedy night, sunset dinner cruise, hiking, ice skating, and you'll leave the kids at home, spend time with one another, and revive and renew. It's $499 per person. That includes your lodging and the marriage conference and all of these fun side activities. And you can even do payments as you go throughout the next few months, which can help break up the cost a little bit unless you're just sitting on that pile of money right now. But I would invest early because these things always get more expensive as the time gets closer. If you're interested, check out TahoeCouplesGetaway.com/LPOP. That's TahoeCouplesGetaway.com/LPOP. And I do these sponsorships because it actually takes money to do and produce this podcast. It turns out that the internet and the podcast host and everybody else don't want to give it to me for free. So you supporting our sponsors or becoming a patron of this program is how I get to keep doing it and giving away all of these resources for free, including the Fun Family Conversations ebook that if you never got a copy of it, today's your day. Just text the word things to 66866. That's things to 66866 and pick up the free ebook that I made to encourage conversation in your family and mine. And I want to dive into this topic. I really do feel like so I'm in the United States, and most of our listeners are in the United States, but there's some all around the world. I don't know what you're experiencing around the world, but I feel like we're on a crazy train. That definitions are changing so rapidly, it feels like words don't mean anything. You can identify as a man, you can identify as a woman, you can identify as something in between. It's just a really frustrating time to live because truth is so incredibly relative. And what I'm seeing in the young people that I'm around is that more and more they are just bombarded with messages that just skew who they are and who they should be. Social media has not been a friend to our children. Phones have not been a friend to our children. You think about it, and I'll say this stuff to the kids, and I won't say that because they don't really listen to that, but I'll say something like, hey, so think about you're getting ready to put a picture on Instagram. How many different pictures do you take before you put the one on that you want? You might take 6 to 15 different pictures to get it just perfect, so you can present to people this presentation of a life that actually does not exist. And we see that all the time, that our kids are bombarded with messages that you are your body, you are your performance, that you're a commodity, and that other people are a commodity to be consumed. If you're in a naturalistic world frame, then it really, what's right and wrong is really majority rule. Whatever society goes along with. And this can be so upsetting and so disturbing. And we find that kids don't really know who they are. They don't know what they're about, and they need a vision. Now, this is so radically different than how culture has been for most of time. Even in broken cultures, even in cultures that were not Christian-based, you think about it, there was a time when in nearly every culture in the world, there was a specific time when a child stopped being looked at as a child by that community, and they started being looked at as an adult. And there was typically a rite of passage that went along with that. If you were a male, there's some crazy, bizarre rites of passage around the world. There's a tribe in the Amazon jungle that puts these gloves on their young men, and the gloves are sewn in with bullet ants. And they have to wear these bullet ant gloves. I think it's for 15 minutes at a time, and then they have to do that 10 to 20 times. And these ants, each one of the stings, it's the most powerful sting of any insect on Earth. Now, let me tell you something. If you're 15 years old and you endure 10 to 20 different repetitions of 15 minutes to an hour of being stung by bullet ants, and you survive it, you know that you have what it takes. You know that you're a man. And with the female cultures, there were all of these different rituals and rite of passage, and I don't even want to describe them because most of them are just, they feel gross to me. But you know that you're a woman. And yet you get in our culture, and young people are given adult choices and exposed to adult things at a very young age, but because our education system keeps delaying further and further, and some of it is because housing market and everything else is more difficult, and beginning wages are lower, it becomes harder and harder to live as an adult. So you have adult desires and exposure to adult things while you're 12, and yet you might still be getting your education at 25 years old and living a party life and totally mooching off of mom and dad. And so we want to combat that. We want to combat people thinking that they are their job, that they are their possessions, that they are their body, and we want to center them on a biblical identity. So let me walk you through 3 important, crucial concepts with that. The first is an identity. The most core identity that we have is being made in the image of God. So what we want to do is center who we are, not on what we look like, not on our talents, not on our family, but on whose we are. You think about it, if you had a painting by Vincent van Gogh, and it was done on a napkin, let's say it was a doodle on a napkin, you could sell that doodle from the napkin. If you could certify that it really was a Vincent van Gogh, you could sell that for $1 million. Not because of the substance that it was on, not even because of whatever the drawing was, but because of the maker of that piece of art. And in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." And the Bible says in Genesis 1:27, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." We need to understand that when you look at a mountain, when you look at the stars of the sky, if you get a chance to go diving and explore the beauty of the depths of the sea, all of that majesty that you see is not the crown of God's handiwork. The crown of God's handiwork is human life. And it's not even just male life, it's human life. When the Bible says, let us make man in our own image, it goes on to clarify that he made them male and female. So it's let's make humanity in our image. So God made humanity in his own image. In the image of God, he created them male and female. He created them. Your children are the crown of God's handiwork. They're the only thing in all of creation, including every other human on earth, that's made in the image of God. There are other things that reflect his power. There are other things that reflect his might, his majesty, his thought, his intellect. But nothing reflects his image like human beings. And if you can help your children to understand that they are the work of art of the master of all time, man, that's so much more important than being a straight A student or being an all-star on the basketball or soccer team. It's so much more important than being a musician. You are made in the image of God. You are secure in your identity, that it is priceless. And we also know that it's priceless because the only thing that could pay for the redemption of humanity was the Son of God. I heard somebody recently say, and it was pretty profound, if God could have redeemed humanity any other way than the death of his own son, what a terrible father he would be for allowing Jesus to die. But the only way to redeem the fallen images of God is through the very Son of God. So you are a priceless work of art. Your children are a priceless treasure of the great creator of all things, and proved that price with the payment of the blood of his son. That's really, really profound. And you might have to say that a million different times over a million different years because somebody makes fun of them or they feel bad or people are just devastating, and you're going to have to tell yourself that as well. But your core identity is not in what you do or where you are or where you came from. It's being made in the image of God. And then as a believer, a redeemed child of God. If anyone is in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things have passed away. All things have become new. Now, what I have found is that we have to take this further in our culture and society, because it's not just identity of humanity that's important, but we really need to redeem an identity for males and females, for men and women. We really need to reestablish a biblical vision of manhood and womanhood, because we realize that men and women are different by design. They really are. I had an article, and if you're one of the early subscribers to Things for Thursday, which you get by signing up for the Fun Family Conversations ebook, which, by the way, I don't know if I told you that or not, but if you want that free ebook, text 66866, the word things, to 66866. So anyway, one of the weeks I sent out an article that listed, I think it was like 60 biological differences between men and women. And I don't even think it mentioned the genitalia. But the very bone structure, the cell structure, the way that our brains process things. Like this one's one that this is just a little free side note for you, and it might help you in your communication with your spouse. When they hook up men and women to brains, probably MRI machines, brain scan machines, I don't know what it is, and they talk about a problem. When a female hears the problem, her brain, the part of her brain that's responsible for empathy, lights up. And throughout hearing the whole problem, that part stays lit up. And we know this. We know that in general, women are much more empathetic than men. It's not that men are uncaring, because when they do the same thing with men, when a man is presented a problem, he really does start in the empathy section of the brain. But something natural happens inside the brain of a man where pretty quickly it moves to the problem-solving area. And so you might have experienced this in your marriage where if if you're a wife and you have shared a problem with your husband, you might have just been wanting empathy. You might have just been wanting support, and instead you get back a solution to your problem. And you're like, I wasn't asking for a solution to the problem. I just wanted to share my problem. I can come up with a solution just fine. Now, this can be confusing for a man because I got to be honest, most of the time, I don't share problems with people unless I think there might be a possibility that they can help me with a solution, because it frustrates me to talk about problems that there's no solution to. I'd just as soon not talk about it. I'd just as soon go do something else. And so the sharing of a problem for a man typically means they're looking for a solution, because that's how a man's brain works. So what have we done in my house? Well, I feel like I hit the wife lottery because she understands and appreciates how I work. So I just am really blessed. But one of the things that I've learned to do sometimes is when my wife shares something that seems like a problem or situation, I will say, hey, I really want to be helpful here, and I'm just wondering, are you sharing this just because you need to vent, or are you sharing this because you're looking for help or solutions to this? And then she can respond, and most of the time she's like, well, if you got a solution, I'd be wide open to it. And then, of course, I fix all of the problems because that's what I like to do. And sometimes my fix-its actually are helpful in there. But that's just an example of the wiring differences between men and women. I heard it explained one time that, the brain of a man is like a waffle and the brain of a woman is like spaghetti, in the sense of, if you think of a waffle, there are all of these different compartments in a waffle. And so you could fill one little grid with syrup and it not touch the thing right beside it. And that's really often how a brain of a man works, is there can be an issue in one area and it cannot affect anything else. It also helps with friendships. I have basketball friends that I have zero commonality with in any other area of life. And yet when we get together and play basketball, we're just fine. I realize that, man, I wouldn't want to hang out with them in normal spheres. That might go really bad. But because we have one commonality, we can share a friendship for years and years. Whereas a female brain has been described more like spaghetti noodles, where, like, if you look at a bowl of spaghetti, it seems like every noodle is touching every other noodle. And so, if you have a relationship issue with one area, it can affect the whole relationship. Now, you marry a waffle brain and a spaghetti brain together, and obviously there's going to be differences. There's going to be conflicts because we're different by design. But you can tell that God was brilliant in that design, because sometimes you need to be able to compartmentalize and you need to be able to just get the job done. And sometimes you really need to explore these things because things don't really exist in isolation and they've got to be solved. And so men and women are different by design, and they are complementary of one another by design. So what we have done with our students is we have worked on giving them a vision of manhood and a vision of womanhood that has nothing to do with being macho, that has nothing to do with being girly, that has nothing to do with whether you like to hunt or, lift heavy things. It has nothing to do with whether you like pink or, like to wear makeup. Our goal is not to mimic the world, but to pull from Scripture what we see. And so this has been something that the very first encounter that I had with it was on the man's side with Robert Lewis and Men's Fraternity, which is a phenomenal resource. I would suggest, if you want to explore this further for men, check out Men's Fraternity. And on the female side, I really worked with the ladies in my student ministry over a long period of time to try to craft a biblical vision of womanhood. And my first couple of attempts were terrible, but with the ladies, we've got it. So what I want to share with you right now is something that I have used over and over again. As a matter of fact, my brother-in-law and a couple other friends, we took our 10-year-old sons on a big trip a couple of years ago, and the whole theme of this trip was real manhood and what it means to be a man. And since that trip, we reference these things in their lives. And I teach them with my students. And then, this year, I'm not teaching them. I'm having the high school seniors teach them to the other students because it's important for them to own these things. So what makes for a real man. A real man, let me give it to you, and I'll post these in the show notes because it's very important that you be able to see them. Think of the acronym REAL, R-E-A-R, or R-E-A-L. A real man rejects passivity, expects God's greater reward, accepts responsibility, and then leads courageously. Let me go through those. A real man rejects passivity. A fallen man, a broken man, a sinful man likes to sit back when there's something that needs to be done and let somebody else do it. Likes to hedge their bets, not take a risk, but stay passive, not lead their family, not do the hard sacrificial work that it takes to spiritually lead their family or financially sacrifice for their family. A fallen, broken, worldly man lives in passivity. Now, I have seen it happen where a guy is a man's man as far as thick, physically strong. I even can think of one that I knew that was a bodyguard for a country music singer, but then in his own house, he was completely passive. Did not lead his wife, did not lead his family, did not pour and invest into his kids, would come home and check out. And that's not a real man. A real man rejects passivity. Number 2, a real man expects God's greater reward. What is this about? This is about self-denial. If I want immediate reward, then whatever temptation I have, I just go with it. Whatever, not even always sinful temptation, but just whatever I want, that's what I go after. But a real man will pay now to have the reward later. A real man will sacrifice now, will set up boundaries, will set up safeguards, will guard their eyes, will guard the female that they're with, knowing that over the long term, God's going to reward them. A real man accepts responsibility. A broken man, a fallen man, a boy shifts blame. But a real man accepts responsibility. And what I coach young men on is, listen, if there's a situation and there's a bunch of people responsible, if you're responsible for any of it, you own your part as hard as you can. This is the same thing I counsel in marriage. If there's a fight and both of you are wrong, don't you worry about the other person. You own your part 100%. You don't expect them to own theirs. You get to them by accepting your responsibility and then let the Lord do the work. So a real man accepts responsibility. And then finally, a real man leads courageously. Now, courage does not mean that you're not afraid. Courage means that in spite of being afraid, in spite of not knowing the outcome, you're willing to step up and step forward. Courage is of the Lord, and a real man leads courageously. So there's this rejects passivity, expects God's greater reward, accepts responsibility, leads courageously. That's hard to remember in the moment. And so something that I've used to simplify it over the years, I started this with my little boys when they were like 3. So if you've got little kids and you want a definition of manhood for your little kids, here it is. You're a man. That means that God made you strong to take care of others. Let me say it one more time. You're a man. That means that God made you strong to take care of others. I don't tell them they will be men. I tell them they are men. And being a man means that God made you strong. Sometimes that's physically, sometimes that's with your words, sometimes that's with your talents. But He made you strong not for yourself, but to take care of others. Now let's talk about the ladies. And the ladies was much more challenging for me because I've never been a girl. And girls are a lot more complicated, at least to me they are. But a real woman rejects worldly identity, expects God's greater reward, acts with strength and wisdom, and loves others boldly. Let me go through those with you. And again, the same acronym, a real woman rejects worldly identity. And there's 2 pendulum swings that we want to avoid. We want to avoid the worldly identity that maybe we think of most naturally, which is that a girl is her body and what she looks like and what she can physically offer to the world. And that's gross. It's evil. And, having daughters makes me much more passionate about how wrong that is. I don't want them to live in that world. I don't want them to subscribe to that world. And so I need to be the kind of man that doesn't feed that in the women around me. So rejects the worldly identity that you're your body, but also rejects what is a fundamentalist identity, which is also worldly, that a woman's sole value is, cleaning a house and making babies. That's ridiculous. A woman is her image is that she's made in the image of God as a representative ruler over God's creation, along with men. They have different roles, but a woman is not second class to men. A woman is not subservient to men. A woman has equal dignity, equal value, and equal worth as an image bearer of God and as a child of God. So a real woman rejects worldly identity and finds her identity in being made in the image of God, and if they're a believer, in being a child of God. A real woman expects God's greater reward. Are you taking the easy way? Are you compromising in relationships? Are you shouldn't be with this person, but they're around. They're the best of what's around. They're not the best. They're just the best of what's around. Are you selling yourself short? Are you giving up on God? Are you thinking that God's not faithful, so you can't hang on? A real woman knows that sometimes you have to sacrifice, sometimes you have to wait, sometimes you have to delay. You have to delay your feelings, you have to delay your urges, and expect God's greater reward, just like a man does, but the temptation areas are often different. A real woman acts with strength and wisdom. A real woman acts with strength and wisdom. There's a kind of strength that I see in ladies that is that's different than the strength of men. One is a lot of times their communication skills, but another is I seem like women have this strength of endurance that's very different than men. And you take pain tolerance for an instant. I can take a spike of pain or like a punch or a hit or something like that better than the ladies in my house. I don't think I could ever do labor. I think that they would have figured out C-sections about 10,000 years ago if it were up to men. But a woman acts with strength and wisdom. Again, you don't use that strength just to get your way. You don't use that strength to manipulate, to backstab, or gossip. You use your strength of relationships. You use your strength of words. You use the strength of the resources that God's giving you, along with wisdom. And I would say that wisdom is knowledge and strength under the Lord's self-control. And so a real woman acts with strength, but they also do it with wisdom because they know that a misplaced, misguided strength can cause all kinds of damage. And then finally, a real woman loves others boldly. I think it's going to be really amazing when we get to heaven and we are around the judgment seat of Christ and He is laying out the rewards. I have a feeling that the vast number of people who have come to Christ on this earth have been led there by ladies. Number one, I think the vast number of people who come to Christ seem to be women, but there always seems to be a godly mom or a godly grandma or a godly woman who has been instrumental in pointing the way to Jesus and praying to Jesus and leading to Jesus in not giving up on someone when all hope should be lost. A real woman loves others boldly. Now, in the same way that we have the strength statement for little boys, I tried to do that with women, and here's what we use. You're a woman. That means that God made you graceful to heal others. God made you graceful to heal others. I see in women across cultures, across the country, across age, that there's a certain grace to women that men don't naturally have. And when channeled and used best, I see that God uses women to heal the broken things in this world. I think you have to be careful because that can lead to things like missionary dating or not having wise boundaries because you think you can rescue somebody. We don't want to do that, but we do want to acknowledge and celebrate that God has made women graceful for the healing of a broken world. So this again is, I feel like, one of the core identity or the core survival skills that your kids need, not just by the time they leave your house. They need this by the time they hit middle school. You need to be able to help ground them and then remind them over and over again that their chief identity is that they're made in the image of God, and that being a real man and a real woman comes with the reward of God and is so much more satisfying than getting your approval from the culture around you, or trying to mimic the ever-changing ideals of manhood and womanhood that a sick, sadistic, perverse society wants to throw at us. Pray for me as I do this in my children's life. I'll pray for you that God would help you in yours. And if you have better or more creative ways to help teach your children these things, let me know. I'm all ears. I want to grow and learn, and I'll be happy to pass them on to other people. Have an awesome day. Friend, thanks so much for listening today. I pray it's been a blessing to you, and if it has, please share this episode with somebody that you care about. If God lays it on your heart, I'd love for you to consider joining our Patreon support community. You can find out about that by going to letsparentonpurpose.com. Finally, if you've got a topic that you'd like to hear me address, send me an email at jay@letsparentonpurpose.com, or give me a shout on the Let's Parent on Purpose Facebook page. Hey, please never forget that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint, and that you need a good church family to thrive through all of the different challenges that you're going to face. Keep pointing each other to Jesus, and enjoy the gift of life that God's giving you today. Hey, whatever season you're in, it won't always be this way, so set your hope on Christ and not your circumstances. Have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you soon.